Talmudic and New Testament portrayals of Herod. That view was reinforced by the historian Josephus, himself a Pharisee, who had potential reasons to hate Herod, as his own family had suffered under Herod's rule. In the end, Herod's image as a ruthless tyrant stuck, even though his methods weren't all that different from the rulers of the time. Herod the Great died in 4 BC. In his will, he divided his kingdom into 4 parts. His sons, Herod Archelaus, Herod Antipas, and Herod Philip, each received a portion, while his sister Salome was also granted a share. The largest and most important part went to Herod Archelaus, who was named in the will as Herod's main successor. He was supposed to inherit the royal title along with control over Judea, Samaria, and Idumea. But Emperor Augustus refused to recognize him as king and instead gave him the lesser title of ethnarch. Archelaus quickly found himself in conflict with the people. There were calls to remove the high priest and several corrupt pro-Roman officials who had served under Herod the Great. Archelaus initially agreed but never followed through. Those officials were loyal to him and useful politically. His broken promises led to a revolt in Jerusalem, which was crushed by his troops with brutal force.
Shalom, shalom, mishpacha. All right, so now we're going to get into who Herod Archelaus was. All right, so by now you watched the video, you saw the first revolt, or the first rebellion, was with Herod Archelaus, and the second rebellion was to the census of Quintilius Varus. Right, so we're going to cover those two characters. So, who was Herod Archelaus? He was ethnarch of Samaria, Judea, and Idumea, including the cities of Caesarea. Okay, he was also over Caesarea and Haifa for 9 years, from 4 BC to 6 AD. He was the son of Herod the Great and Malchus the Samaritan. Okay, and she was a woman who lived in the later half. She was one of the wives of Herod. Uh, Mother of Herod Antipas, Archelaus, and a daughter of Olympias. She died in 4 BC in Rome. The Samaritan, brother of Herod Antipas and half-brother of Herod Archelaus, a name meaning leading the people, came to power after the death of his father Herod the Great in 4 BC and ruled over one half of the territory dominion of his father. Archelaus was removed by the Roman Emperor Augustus when Judea province was formed under direct Roman rule at the time of the census of Quirinius. Okay, and we're going to cover that in a minute. Josephus writes that Herod the Great, father of Archelaus, was in Jericho at the time of his death. Just prior to his final trip to Jericho, he was deeply involved in a religious conflagration. Herod had placed a golden triangle, a golden eagle over the temple entrance, a symbol which was perceived as blasphemous. The eagle was chopped down with axes. 2 teachers and approximately 40 other youths were arrested for this act and emulated Herod's defended his works, and emulated, what's emulated? Death by burning as an execution. Okay, so he burned them. Herod defended his works and went on to attack his predecessors, the Hasmoneans. He also killed all male lineal successors of the Hasmoneans. The Pharisees had long insulted the Hasmoneans as well with clans of percentage from Greeks, parentage, as well with claims of parentage from Greeks. The racial slur was repeated by the Pharisees through the rule of Alexander Janus and Queen Salome, right? Because after they died, he split up the kingdom amongst his children. With this explicit background given, Josephus began an exposition in the days of Archelaus' reign before Passover of 4 BC. Archelaus, dressed in white and ascended a golden throne, he appeared to be kind to the populace in Jerusalem. In order to appease the desires for lower taxes and an end of the political imprisonment of Herod's enemies, the demeanor of the questioning appeared to turn at some point, and the crowd began to call for the punishment of those of Herod's people who ordered the death of the 2 teachers and the 40 youths. They also demanded the replacement of the high priest from the appointed high priest of Herod's to the high priest of greater piety and purity. Archelaus acceded to this request and asked the crowd for moderation until he was confirmed king by Octavius Augustus. While people were mourning the death of the teachers, Archelaus began to worry as the crowd started streaming into the temple area and the masses were escalating in their threatening behavior. Henry St. John Thackeray's translation of Josephus here states it thus: the promoters of the mourning of the doctor stood in the body of the temple procuring recruits for their faction. So Archelaus sent a general and a tribune in command of a cohort to reason with these seditionists and wait until Archelaus could return from Rome. Those who came from Archelaus were stoned, with many killed. After midnight, Archelaus ordered the entire army into the city to the temple where the insurrectionists had gone to perform sacrifices. Josephus records the death toll at 3,000. Archelaus sent heralds around the city announcing the cancellation of Passover. Okay, so these are the little bitty revolts and under the Roman rule that they were getting tired of and so they created, in the New Testament because as long as we kept the Torah, we was eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and we were gonna rebel. All right. Archelaus was proclaimed king by the army, but declined to assume the title until he had submitted his claims to Caesar Augustus. Thus, he sailed to Rome to face accusations from his younger brother Antipas over how the recent uproar was handled and regarding the succession clash between the two. Nicholas of Damascus argued in favor of Archelaus, suggesting the change into Herod's will, supposedly written a few weeks prior, and yielding the kingship to Archelaus instead of Antipas, is valid. The change of the will is attested from Jericho by one Ptolemy, keeper of Herod's seal and brother to Nicholas. To Nicholas. Archelaus, at the conclusion of the arguments, fell at Caesar's feet. Caesar raised him up and stated that Archelaus was worthy to succeed his father. Caesar opted to divide the kingdom and entrusted the most important regions of Judea to Archelaus by granting him the tetrarchy of Judah and bestowing the title of ethnarch upon him. The first wife of Archelaus is given by Josephus simply as Myrame, perhaps Myrame III, daughter of Aristobulus the fourth, whom whom he divorced to marry Glyphra. She was the widow of Archelaus' brother Alexander, though her second husband Juba, king of Mauritania was alive. His subjects accompanied to Augustus over the violation of the Mosaic law. Archelaus fell in disrepute and was deposed in his 10th year of reign as ethnarch, being banished to Vienna, today Vienne in Gaul. Samaria, Judah proper, and Idumea became the Roman province of Judea. All right, and it says that the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, may refer to Archelaus' journey to Rome. So, all right, and so this is what I'm saying. Like they're putting them in a good light. All right, now let's the
More than 3,000 people were killed. Not long after, another uprising broke out in the surrounding countryside. This time, the Roman governor of Syria, Publius Quintilius Varus, stepped in and crushed the rebellion, crucifying over 2,000 rebels. Varus would later meet his own end in the disastrous Battle of the Teutoburg Forest.
the Samaritan uprising. Well, the actually, let's go back and look at the up here at the Quintus, the census of Quintus. All right, so now we have the census of Quirinius. The census of Quirinius was a census of the Roman province of Judea taken in 6 CE upon its formation by the governor of Roman Assyria, Publius Sulpicius Quirinius. Okay, and the census triggered a revolt of Jewish extremists called Zealots, led by Judas of Galilee, and this is actually not right. It was actually the Zealots were created by Hezekiah the Zealot. Okay, Hezekiah the Zealot actually started the Zealots. It wasn't Judas the Galilean. Okay, he had his own thing going, but they were from the same area. It says the Gospels date the birth of the idol to the time of Herod the Great, which died between 5 BCE and 1 CE, while the Gospel of Matthew only references Herod, right? So, in order to install ad valorem property tax in the new province, Publius Sulpicius Quirinius, the legate or governor of the province of Roman Syria, starting in 6 CE, was assigned to carry out a census in Judea. This would record the names of the owners of taxable property along with its value for which they would be taxed. The census triggered a revolt of Jewish extremists called Zealots, led by Judas the Galilean, but I'm going to show you it was Hezekiah. Galilee itself was a separate territory under the rule of Herod Antipas. Judas seemed to have found the census objectionable because it ran counter to biblical injunction, the traditional Jewish reading of Exodus 30 and 12, and because it would lead to taxes paid to heathen coins bearing an image of the emperor. So that's why they had a problem of it, right? Let's see here. Here's their name again, Justin Martyr. It says, second century Christian apologist Justin Martyr claimed without evidence that the record of the census was still available and that it showed that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, which is a lie. So yeah, I'd be lying. And if you look at the video that's coming up, I think later on, I have a conversation between Trifo and Justin Martyr, and you'll see Trifo is really, lobbing his head off. Another Christian apologist, Tertullian, suggested Jesus was recorded as an census in Judea conducted by Sentius Saturnus, governor of Syria from 9 to 7 BCE, which I doubt all that stuff, right? Because, later on you'll see why, what Trifo says, who came during that time. Says Josephus mentions Judas of Galilee committing a religious revolt shortly after Herod's death, and another in 6 CE, mentioning the Thisis during the 6 CE revolt, right? So I'm going to show you that one of these is actually Hezekiah. Most scholars believe that Judas of Galilee caused both revolts, but Rhodes claims that these are the same revolts due to similarities, such as the high priest Joazar being deposed in both accounts. Josephus also reports a similar religious revolt before Herod's death by Judas, son of the Sephorian. This revolt also mentions a high priest being deposed and Joazar taking his place. Rose argues that this is the same Judas and the same revolt due to these and other similarities. Such is the account shortly after Herod's death involving activity in Sepphoris. Rhodes concludes by saying that it is most likely that all revolts were the same event that Josephus duplicated, that it took place before Herod's death, since Herod orders Judas's execution, and that the census of Quirinius was therefore before Herod's death, not 6 CE. So Judas, that's where they got the Judas, on the cross. He took Judas down. Judas betrayed him for silver, etc. All right. Now, who was Publius Quintus Verus? Okay. Um, Let me find him.
But the violence didn't bring peace. From the moment of Herod the Great's death, Judea was stuck in a cycle of unrest and guerrilla resistance that it never fully went away. Eventually, Augustus had enough. In 6 AD, he removed Archelaus from power and exiled him to Gaul, where he lived out the rest of his life in obscurity.
Hold on. Thought I had it pulled up. It's Hezekiah the Zealot. All right, because that's what we're going to hit next. All right, so who Hezekiah the Zealot was? He was a martyr, but some scholars identify with Hezekiah ben Goran of the Talmud. He fought for Jewish freedom and the supremacy of the Jewish law at the time when Herod was governor of Galilee, 47 BE, when King Aristobulus took taken prisoner by the Romans and had been poisoned by the followers of Pompey. Hezekiah gathered together the remnants of that king's army in the mountains of Galilee and carried a successful guerrilla war against the Romans and Syrians while awaiting the opportunity for a general uprising against Rome. The pious men of the country looked upon him as an avenger of their honor and liberty. Antipater, the governor of the country, and his sons, however, who were Rome's agents in Palestine, viewed this patriotic band differently. In order to carry favor with the Romans, Herod, unauthorized by King Hyrcanus, advanced against Hezekiah, taking him prisoner and beheaded him without the formality of a trial. And he also slew many of his followers. This deed excited the indignation of his patriots. Hezekiah and his band were enrolled among the martyrs of the nation, and that's where he was the beginning of the Sicarii. Okay, he started the Sicarii. Now, Publius Quintus, right, 46 BCE, right? When did Hezekiah? 47 BCE, right? Okay, then that's proof that it wasn't Judas the Galilean. Judas the Galilean had his own revolt around that time, and Hezekiah the Zealot had a revolt around the same time. So that's two revolts during the same time that they were dealing with. Publius Verus was a Roman general and politician serving under Augustus, who founded the Roman Empire. He is generally remembered for having lost 3 Roman legions in the Battle of Teutoburg Forest, during which he committed suicide to avoid capture and inevitable execution and shameful reproach. Varus defeated the Germanic tribes led by Irenaeus, and considered to be one of the most important events in European history, as it dissuaded the Romans from further expanding into Germania, and thus prevented the Romanization of the Germanic peoples east of the Rhine. Okay, so we don't want to talk about that. We want to try to find what it says about him in Judea. All right, so down here, what does it say? Governor of Africa and Judea and Syria and Judea. In 8 to 7 BC, Varus governed the African province. Later, he went on to govern Syria, Judea, and the Levant from 7 to 6 BCE to 4 BCE, with 4 legions under his command, and was notorious for his harsh rule and high taxes. The Jewish historian Josephus mentions the swift action of Varus against a messianic revolt after the death of the Romans. Jewish client King Herod the Great in 4 BC. After occupying Jerusalem, he crucified 2,000 Jews, making him one of the prime objects of popular resentment against Roman rule in Judea. Per archaeological evidence, the people of Judea took part in a popular full-scale boycott of Roman pottery, red slipware, in protest of Varus' cruelty. Following the massacre, Varus returned to Antioch. Okay, and so that was this time in there, and so that during his time is when Hezekiah the Zealot, who was born in 47 BCE, took up arms and revolted. In the same time, Judas the Galilean did the same thing. Okay, now wanted to read some right here, so you can see in this right here from Truth Magazine, from this professor right here. This is a cited work. Let's see here. Let me go back. The cited work. Actually, this right here is not a cited work, but
Herod Philip was a relatively calm and moderate ruler. His tetrarchy covered parts of what is now southern Lebanon and the Golan Heights. Unlike some of his more ruthless relatives, Philip governed without cruelty and focused on maintaining peace and stability in his region. Area Philippi, and expanded the small village of Bethsaida into a larger city, which he renamed Julius. Philip died in 34 AD in Julius. Since he had no children, his territory was placed under direct Roman rule after his death. Salome, the sister of Herod the Great, inherited a small region after his death. Her lands included part of what is now the Gaza Strip, as well as the cities of Ashdod, Ashkelon, and a small area north of Jericho. Unlike her nephews, who ruled over larger territories and were focused on consolidating their power, Salome had little political ambition. Her rule was quiet and uneventful. She governed her lands until her death in 10 AD, after which her territory also came under direct Roman control. Another son of Herod the Great, Herod Antipas, was given control over Galilee and Perea. He ruled until 39 AD, making him the longest reigning of Herod's sons. Like his father, Antipas was a keen builder. He founded the city of Tiberias on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, naming it in honor of the Roman Emperor Tiberius. He also invested in rebuilding and improving other cities, hoping to boost the local economy and make them more livable. Despite his long rule, Antipas never really received the title of king, though he pursued it for years. His political downfall came after a falling out with his nephew, Herod Agrippa. Agrippa accused him of plotting against Rome and reported him to Emperor Caligula. In 39 AD, Antipas was removed from power and exiled to Gaul, where he spent the rest of his life in obscurity. The last rulers from the Herodian line were Herod Agrippa I and his son Herod Agrippa II, Herod the Great's great-grandson and great-great-grandson. Both held the title of King of Judea, but by then it was mostly ceremonial. Neither had real power. They were fully Romanized and served as loyal client rulers under the Roman Empire. After Emperor Augustus removed Archelaus from power in 6 AD, Judea came under direct Roman rule. Instead of appointing a new client king, the Romans chose to govern the region through their own officials, first called prefects and later known as procurators. The difference between the two titles is subtle but different. A prefect was typically a military officer from the equestrian class who also had administrative duties. A procurator, on the other hand, was originally a financial official responsible for collecting taxes and managing the emperor's assets and estates in the province. Over time, the role of procurator expanded, and by the mid-1st century AD, they were given both financial and military authority in smaller provinces like Judea. The most well-known of these officials was Pontius Pilate, who governed Judea from 26 to 36 AD. Unlike most Roman governors, who usually served short terms, Pilate remained in power for a full decade, an unusually long tenure. This suggests that despite frequent conflicts, Emperor Tiberius saw him as a dependable and effective defender of Roman interests in the region. Pilate's arrival in Judea quickly stirred religious tensions. Unlike his predecessors, he ordered Roman soldiers to march into Jerusalem carrying standards bearing the image of the emperor, something Jews considered a clear violation of the ban on idolatry in their holy city. Outraged, a delegation of Jewish leaders traveled to Pilate's residence in Caesarea to protest. When Pilate threatened them with execution, they responded by baring their necks, ready to die rather than tolerate what they saw as blasphemy. Realizing that a massacre would only cause more unrest, Pilate backed down and ordered the standards removed. But the unrest didn't stop there. In another incident, Pilate took money from the temple treasury to fund the construction of an aqueduct in Jerusalem. When protests broke out, he sent soldiers disguised in civilian clothes into the crowd. On his signal, they pulled out hidden clubs and violently dispersed the demonstrators. The Gospels portray Pilate as a reluctant official who condemned Jesus only under pressure from the Jewish authorities. But that image likely reflects an early Christian effort to shift blame away from Rome. Jewish authors of the time, like Philo and Josephus, paint a very different picture, one of a harsh, corrupt governor with little respect for Jewish beliefs. In 36 AD, Pilate brutally suppressed a religious movement in Samaria. A prophet had claimed to know the location of sacred relics hidden by Moses, and the crowds gathered to follow him. Pilate responded with a violent crackdown, killing many of the prophet's followers. The Samaritans filed a complaint with the Roman governor of Syria, Vitellius, who ordered Pilate to return to Rome to answer for his actions. By the time he arrived, Emperor Tiberius had died, and what happened to Pilate after that remains unknown.
It is a work from Truth Magazine written by Fred Shoemaker. It was in Indiana. It's titled Jewish Sects and Zealots and Herodians. Okay, so down here it says Josephus referred to the Zealots as the fourth sect of Jewish philosophy, as we noticed in the first article in this series. In the first article, we classified the Zealots as a political party. However, we also observed that the conduct of the various sects indicate that a religious sect would have definite political leanings, while a political sect would be composed of those definite religious views. This is true of the political party designated Zealots. All right, so they were nationalists. Hezekiah. Hezekiah, under whose leadership the Zealots arose. So right here, it's the proof that Hezekiah started the Zealots. Was martyred by Herod. Their appearance in the political horizon of Palestine came early in the Roman occupation. They were particularly active in 6 AD during the revolt of Judas of Gamala in Galilee. So he was known as Judas the Galilean, right? So they were, like I said, they were together. Who maintained that compliance with the Roman demand for a census would constitute an act of enslavement among Palestinians. Josephus was apparently unaware of the role played by Hezekiah in the rise of the Zealots. This appears from his reference to Judas as their author. They were most influential in Galilee and later in Jerusalem, especially from the time of Herod, 37 BCE to 4 AD, until the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. They refused to pay taxes and considered it a sin to acknowledge loyalty to Caesar. They harassed the Roman administration with every means at their disposal. They relentlessly opposed a Roman attempt to bring Judea under idolatrous rule. Josephus wrote that they agree in all things with the Pharisaic notions, but that they are in unavoidable attachment to liberty, and say that God is to be their only ruler and Lord. It was from among the zealots that the extreme Sicarii rose. They were called Sicarii from the customs of going about with daggers, called Sakai, hidden beneath their cloaks, with which they would stab any person found committing a sacrilegious act or anything or provoking anti-Jewish feelings. The Zealots regarded themselves as defenders of the law and national life of the Jewish people. They claimed the right to assassinate any Roman who dared to enter the consecrated parts of the temple, a privilege which was officially recognized. Right, and so one of these schools took its name from the foremost teachers. So there were two schools of thought amongst them. It was the Pharisees, and then the Sadducees of legal thought. Well, actually, there was two schools of legal thought among the Pharisees. One of these schools took its name from the foremost teacher, Shammai. Shammai was bitterly opposed to the Romans. Pfeiffer wrote, this viewpoint ultimately found an expression in the Zealots whose resistance to the Romans brought on the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Josephus wrote, they did not value dying any kinds of death, nor can any such fear make them call any man Lord. So that is why they had to build that New Testament with the turning of the cheek and all the things like that, because we were rebelling, and revolting left and right, and we didn't care about death. We didn't care about death because we knew Ezekiel and the dry bones that we would live. Prior to the rebellion of AD 66, the Zealots became popular with all classes of Jews. Their followers increased in number. They gained control in Jerusalem, removed the high priest, cast lots to elect his successor, and fortified the city. The popularity of the Zealots after they gained control was short-lived. They terrorized their political opponents who had accepted foreign rule. So if you accepted the Romans, they would terrorize you. The people then drove the Zealots into the inner court of the temple. During this conflict, the Zealots were under the leadership of Eleazar ben Simon. The Idumeans came to the aid of the Zealots, and they were able to regain control of Jerusalem under the leadership of John Gershala and resume their acts of terror. When the final siege of Jerusalem by the Romans began, the Zealots advocated and used most extreme measures, which brought about the collapse and destruction of the city in 70 AD. One of our Lord's apostles was Simon called Zelotes in Luke chapter 6, verse 15. This designation appears to be a reference to Simon's party affiliation before he became a follower of Christ, right? The other political party that we listed in the first article was the Herodians. Young wrote that they favored Greek customs, and that is true, right? And you see that too also in Mark 3 and 6. But let's go look at Luke 6, 14, 15. And as you can see, Simon, who was called the Zealot. So as you can see, man, this is more proof of why they wrote a more passive testament, called it the New Testament, because and they incorporated the zealot. Why would you even just say Simon, the one called the zealot, in there if you wasn't fighting these zealots all throughout this time and they wasn't giving you hell, right? As you can see, it's little bits and pieces in here. If you don't know the history, you wouldn't be able to tell that this is a Roman work. Okay, this is a Roman work. All right, so we're just gonna briefly go over this right here, and we're gonna do a video on each one of these self-proclaimed messiahs as well. There'll be videos coming up on those as well. All right, so um, right, just right here it says after Pilate things got worse in 44 CE, a wonder-working prophet named Thaddeus crowned himself Messiah and brought hundreds of followers to the Jordan. The Romans, in response, dispatched an army to lop off Thaddeus' head and scattered his followers into the desert. In 46 CE, two sons of Judas the Galilean, Jacob and Simon, launched their own revolutionary movement in the steps of their father and grandfather. Both were crucified for their actions. In 40 CE, a group of bandits led by a man named Eleazar, son of Danius, took justice into their own hands and went on a rampage through Samaria. It was an assertion of freedom by a people fed up with allowing law and order to rest in the hands of the crooked and fickle administration of Rome. In 56 CE, the Sicarii under Menahem's leadership slit the high priest Jonathan's throat, shouted their slogan, "No Lord but God," and began attacking the members of the Jewish ruling class, plundering their possessions, kidnapping their relatives, and burning down their homes. In 62 CE, a holy man named Jesus of Ananias suddenly appeared, prophesying the destruction of Jerusalem and the imminent return of the Messiah. And also in 62 CE, another man, a mysterious Jewish sorcerer called the Egyptian, declared himself king of the Jews and gathered thousands of followers on the Mount of Olives. The crowd was massacred by Roman troops. All of this culminated in the Great Jewish Revolt in 66 CE when zealots evicted non Jews from Jerusalem and declared war on the Roman Empire. So that's what we're going to understand. Then you have there was Hezekiah the bandit chief, beheaded by Herod the Great early in his long career, 40 BCE. Simon of Perea, a former slave of Herod the Great, led an uprising and was killed by the Romans, sometime between 4 BCE and 15 BCE. And Thralgaz the shepherd, Israel had a long history of insurgent shepherds, and his brother led another rebellion and were defeated by Herod Archelaus. Judas the Galilean, son of Hezekiah, was a Messiah who led the resistance to Quirinius' census, which we just read, right? Now, in some cases, revolutionary leader was a family vocation handed down from father to son almost as surely as Kohens entered the priesthood. Hezekiah, the bandit chief, beheaded by Herod in 40 BCE, begat Judas the Galilean, who resisted Quirinius' Thisis in 6 CE, fate unknown. Begat James and Simon, both executed by Tiberius in 46 CE, who begat Menahem, killed in faction fighting during the Jewish-Roman War, and his cousin Eleazar, who committed suicide at Masada in the final act of the war in 73 CE. It is a common pattern among oppressed peoples. And just so now you see why they gave you a passive savior, a passive Messiah, because every Messiah that we had in history in the Torah and Tanakh was militaristic, okay? Because they had to do these things. They had to restore, Israel to the land, kick out the enemies, and restore Torah, okay? Institute Torah into the land, tear down the idols and push out idolatry, institute Torah law, all right? Institute the government of the Most High, and these people attempted to do these things, but Christ didn't do these things at all. He told you give Caesar what Caesar's, turn the other cheek, to do all these other kind of things, and that was not in the Torah of the Tanakh. Okay, all right. So leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about the video. I appreciate y'all who got all the way through the video and watched it all the way through. I hope I was able to edify you. If you have any other questions, leave a comment below and leave a question, and let us know what you think and let us know what your question is, and we'll get to it. We'll answer because we like to interact with our people. And we have some more videos coming up in this series. Okay, each one of these so-called rebel leaders or messiahs, messiahs, we will be covering and making video over in this series. Why Rome created the New Testament. All right, so this is for part one. Well, why Rome created the New Testament. Part two and part three is already done, and they'll be uploaded a couple of days. Or actually, they already uploaded. They'll go live a couple of days after this one right here. Okay, so watch them in the series, and make sure you start off with this one and watch the part two, part three, and all the way through. Okay, because it's going to be packed with information and bringing you the history about the climate, about why Rome would create a whole New Testament and give us a whole nother Savior other than what the Most High said. All right, give us a passive Savior instead of a militaristic Savior. All right, so until the next video, I bid you, brothers and sisters, shalom, shalom.